The train station was busy that morning. People rushed past, carrying briefcases, coffee cups, and backpacks. The usual noise filled the air. The squeal of train wheels on tracks, the loud announcements from the speakers, the chatter of commuters trying to catch their trains on time. Everyone was in their own world, focused on their schedule, their destinations, their lives. No one noticed the man who walked quietly toward the middle of the station. He didn't look special in any way. He was dressed simply in a plain shirt and trousers. There was nothing flashy about him. No one would guess that he was someone famous, someone important, someone who could command the attention of thousands with a single move. He walked slowly, almost as if he didn't want to be noticed. His eyes scanned the crowd, but he didn't seem anxious or nervous. He was calm. He carried a small backpack on one shoulder. Every so often, he adjusted it, as if it carried only light things, but the truth was, it carried more than anyone could imagine: memories, experiences, and a secret longing he had not fulfilled in years. Near the center of the station, a public piano stood, tucked beside a pillar. Most people ignored it, walking past with barely a glance. Some might have even wondered why it was there. It looked old, the keys slightly worn from years of use. There were scratches on the surface, faint marks that told the story of many hands that had played it before. Some people had stopped briefly to tap a few keys, often as a joke, or to see if they could remember a tune. But for the most part, it was ignored. The man approached the piano and stood in front of it. He looked around briefly, almost as if he were checking to see if anyone was paying attention. There were a few commuters nearby, but none of them seemed to care. A group of teenagers walked past, laughing loudly, earbuds in their ears. One of them nudged the other and whispered something, clearly pointing at the man. They thought he looked strange, too serious, too quiet, too plain. "Think he can even play?" One of them muttered. "Bet he can't," the other replied. Smirking. The man didn't respond. He only smiled softly, almost imperceptibly, and lifted the piano cover. His fingers hovered over the keys for a moment, just touching them lightly, testing their weight and texture. He seemed familiar with the instrument, though he had not touched one in public for years. The way he held himself, the way he exhaled, suggested a kind of comfort that came from experience, from memory, from a deep connection with the music hidden inside him. A few people nearby glanced over, curious. They saw a man about their age, plain and quiet, standing in front of a piano. He didn't look like anyone special. He didn't have a uniform, a badge, or any sign of importance. Some assumed he was just another passerby, maybe someone who liked music. Others thought he might be homeless or lost. No one suspected he was a tycoon, someone wealthy beyond imagination, someone who could live in luxury and travel anywhere in the world. Here, in this busy station, he was just another person among hundreds. He took a deep breath and pressed a single key. The note sounded soft, almost shy. It was not perfect, but it was steady. People nearby paused for a moment, turning their heads. There was something in the sound, a warmth that cut through the clamor of the station. Even in that short, simple note, there was a sense of purpose. A mother with a small child in her arms stopped. The child squirmed, wanting to run and play, but the mother held him gently. She looked at the man, curious. Something in his posture, in his quiet confidence, drew her attention. She couldn't explain it, but she felt like she should listen. Just for a moment. On a bench nearby, a man who usually slept there every morning, a homeless veteran, lifted his head. He had seen many people in this station. Most of them didn't care. Most of them ignored him. But this man, this quiet, plain-looking man, seemed different. He had a presence that didn't demand attention, but still made itself known. The veteran rubbed his eyes and looked closer. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was memory. Maybe it was something he couldn't name. The tycoon's fingers moved to the keys again. This time, he pressed 2 notes together. The sound was soft, but it filled a small corner of the station. Commuters continued moving past, but some slowed down. Their footsteps became hesitant. They glanced over, a flicker of curiosity in their eyes. They didn't know why, but they felt drawn to the music, even before it truly began. He paused again, closing his eyes for a moment. The station's noise surrounded him, but he seemed untouched by it. He was somewhere else now, in a place that existed only between him and the piano. Memories surfaced his childhood, the first time he had played a piano properly, the long hours of practice that nobody had seen, the small victories and failures that had shaped him. Music had always been his escape, his solace, his joy. But over the years, life had demanded other things. Business meetings, negotiations, travel, success, and wealth had taken priority. The piano had remained in the background, a quiet companion he rarely visited. Today, he decided to return, not for anyone else, but for himself. The teenagers who had whispered earlier leaned closer, curious now. One nudged the other. "Maybe he can play," one whispered. "Yeah, maybe," the other replied, surprised. He began to play a simple tune, gentle and slow. It was not flashy, not meant to impress anyone, but there was a depth to it, a sense of feeling that went beyond the notes themselves. People nearby stopped completely. Some leaned against walls. Some stood with their bags still in hand, just listening. Even those hurrying to catch trains felt their pace slow, as if the music had its own rhythm, and they were caught in it. A young woman carrying a heavy bag paused. She had been rushing, stressed about a meeting, worried about an email she had forgotten to send, but the sound of the piano made her stop. She looked at the man and felt a strange calm. Something about the way he played made the world around her seem smaller, simpler, more manageable. For a moment, she forgot about her stress, her worries, her deadlines. She just listened. The man played more notes, letting them flow naturally. Each note seemed to tell a story. There was sadness, yes, but also hope. There was longing, but also warmth. Even those who did not consciously think about it felt its impact. The janitor cleaning nearby stopped mid-sweep. His mop paused in the air. He had seen many things in the station, many strange events, but this felt different. The music reached into him, stirring feelings he had buried long ago. Commuters started noticing each other. Strangers who had never spoken found themselves nodding at one another, smiles appearing without reason. The music created a connection, invisible but tangible, linking people together in that crowded station. A man in a suit glanced at an older woman carrying groceries. She smiled faintly, and he nodded back, both acknowledging something beyond words. The tycoon did not play for them. He played for himself, for the memories that had been tucked away, for the emotions that needed an outlet. But in doing so, he reached everyone around him. He did not need recognition, applause, or praise. His satisfaction came from the music itself, the act of creating, of expressing, of being alive in that moment. A few children nearby stopped playing. They had been chasing each other, laughing, but the sound of the piano made them curious. They tiptoed closer, fascinated by the man who seemed to hold a world in his fingers. They did not understand the technical skill, the experience, or the years of practice. They only understood that it was beautiful, that it was something they wanted to watch and hear more of. Even the people who were running late, those who glanced at their watches constantly, found themselves slowing their pace. Some leaned against railings, some sat on benches, some simply stopped walking. The music had a way of commanding attention without demanding it. It created a pause in the chaos, a space where time seemed to stretch, and everyone felt just a little lighter, a little calmer. The man's eyes opened briefly, scanning the audience, though he did not seek it. He saw the young mother with her child, the veteran on the bench, the janitor, the teenagers, the children, the workers in suits and uniforms. None of them paid him for his presence. None of them knew who he really was, but that did not matter. Their reactions, their quiet attention, their unspoken acknowledgement were enough. They were listening, and he was finally speaking again through music. He pressed a few more keys, letting a melody form. It was simple, humble, yet filled with emotion. It was a start, a beginning, the first notes of something more. People began to gather slowly, forming a loose circle around him. They did not push, they did not crowd. They merely wanted to witness, to feel, to connect. The station, usually a place of rush and stress, had transformed into a small sanctuary, created by a man, and his piano. The first part of his performance was over, but it was more than just music. It was a message, a reminder, a bridge between people who had never met. The notes he played were small, simple, but they carried weight. They reminded everyone that beauty could be found in unexpected places, that calm could exist in chaos, that a stranger could touch hearts without a word. He paused, letting the last note linger, as if giving everyone a moment to absorb it. The station buzzed with its usual noise, but there was a difference now. People felt it. Something had shifted, imperceptibly, quietly, but undeniably. They did not yet know the full story, who he was, or why he played, but they felt its impact, and that. The man's fingers hovered over the keys for a moment, not moving yet, as if he were listening to the sounds around him before continuing. The station had returned to its usual hum of voices, footsteps, and rolling suitcases, but there was a subtle difference now. Some people who had hurried past earlier had slowed their steps. Their ears had caught something they couldn't explain, something gentle yet familiar, a sound that seemed to reach straight into the heart. He pressed a single key, soft at first, barely louder than a whisper. The note resonated clearly, cutting through the low murmur of the crowd. It was a hesitant beginning, cautious, almost shy, as if he were testing not only the piano but himself. Memories flickered behind his eyes, not painful memories, but delicate. Fragments of moments long ago, afternoons spent alone at a piano, the sound of his own music filling empty rooms. The joy and pride in every note that came naturally when he was younger. A mother with a small child stopped near the piano. The child's attention had been drawn by the faint sound, and his tiny fingers clenched his mother's sleeve. She smiled, encouraging him to look, to listen, to notice. Something about the way the man held himself, calm and deliberate, caught her attention. There was no arrogance, no show, no pretense, just quiet intent. She felt a strange warmth, a gentle curiosity tugging at her heart. A homeless man sitting on a nearby bench lifted his head. He had been sleeping lightly, worn out from the cold. Night before, yet something in the notes stirred him awake. His eyes focused on the man at the piano, and for the first time in a long while, he felt a faint smile tug at his lips. He had not expected to feel anything like this in his station crowded with strangers. Yet the music spoke to him, reaching inside, touching something hidden and long forgotten. The man pressed a few more keys, still soft, each note deliberate and careful. They were simple notes, not complicated or showy, but each one held a meaning that words could not capture. Commuters glanced over curiously, their steps slowing. Some adjusted their bags, some stopped completely, unsure why they were suddenly drawn to the small piano and the quiet man in front of it. There was something unusual in the air, a shift that they could not name, a sense that something beautiful was about to unfold. A group of teenagers who had laughed earlier stood at a distance now, whispering to one another. "Do you hear that?" One asked, disbelief clear in his voice. "I didn't think he could play," another replied, his voice soft. "But it's different." They watched, captivated in a way they had not anticipated. The man's music was not loud or dramatic, but it held a presence that could not be ignored. He played not for applause, not for recognition, but because it had been a part of him for so long, and he had returned to it finally, letting the notes flow naturally. Nearby, a young office worker paused, her briefcase still in hand. She had been rushing, worried about a meeting that she feared she would be late to. Her mind was a tangle of schedules, emails, and tasks, but the sound of the piano pulled her attention away. She stopped and listened. For the first time in hours, maybe days, she felt herself breathe deeply. The tension in her shoulders eased. She had no idea who the man was, but the music made the world feel lighter, smaller, more manageable. The homeless man shifted slightly, moving closer on his bench, leaning on his cane for support. He remembered a piano from long ago, one in a school he had attended as a boy. He had not played in years, had not touched music in decades. Yet the melody that flowed from the keys reminded him of those simpler times, of dreams that had once felt possible. A tear formed in his eye, unnoticed by those around him. As the music reached deep into his heart, the mother and child were still standing near the piano. The child had stopped fidgeting, fascinated by the movements of the man's hands. He watched. The fingers dance over the keys, not too fast, not too slow, every note placed just right. The mother noticed the concentration on the man's face, the way he seemed entirely absorbed in the music, unaware of the eyes watching him. She felt a sense of gratitude, though she did not know why. It was as if the music was meant for her. And her child, a quiet gift in the middle of a chaotic day. The man's eyes closed as he continued to play. He was no longer cautious now, no longer hesitant. The first few notes had served their purpose, inviting him, allowing him to settle. Now the melody grew, flowing from him naturally, freely, as though the years of practice and hidden passion were suddenly pouring out into the world. Each note held intention. Each chord carried emotion. It was a story he was telling without words, a story of longing, of beauty, of quiet strength. A janitor sweeping nearby paused. He had seen many things in the station, many performers, many unusual events, but this felt different. He lowered his broom and leaned against the wall, letting the music reach him. He did not need to understand it, nor did he need to know who the man was. He only needed to listen. Something about the music made him reflect on his own life, on small regrets and lost opportunities, on hopes that were still alive even in difficult circumstances. The commuters who had been rushing to catch their trains now found themselves moving slowly. Some looked at their watches, realizing they might be late, but for the first time, lateness felt unimportant. Something larger, more meaningful, was happening right in front of them. The music was commanding attention, not through volume or spectacle, but through its honesty, its simplicity, its depth. The teenagers whispered again. "He's really good," one said. "It's emotional." "Yeah," the other agreed. "I didn't think a person could play like that in public, just like that." The man continued, letting the melody flow in waves. There was sadness in some notes, joy in others, and a gentle hope beneath it all. It was music that told a story of life itself, its struggles, its quiet victories, its small moments of beauty. People began to notice one another more, sharing glances and subtle smiles. A sense of connection grew quietly in the crowded station. Strangers were united by something invisible, something intangible, yet deeply felt. A woman carrying groceries paused near the piano. She had been tired, her arms heavy, her mind burdened with errands and responsibilities. She leaned against a pillar and let the music wash over her. For a moment, she forgot about the weight in her arms, about the errands. Waiting at home. She felt lighter, almost as if the music had lifted some invisible burden from her shoulders. Even the children stopped playing their small games in the corner of the station. They walked closer, curious and captivated. They had not learned to analyze music or understand its technicalities, but they felt the emotion, the warmth, the gentle command of the melody. They watched as the man's fingers moved skillfully over the keys, and they listened, their young minds absorbing something they could not yet name. The man's expression was serene. He was not performing. He was existing, letting the music express what words could not. He thought about the first time he had truly played, when he was younger, alone in a quiet room. How the music had been his friend, his companion, his voice. Life had taken him away from it, pulled him into other worlds of meetings, decisions, and responsibilities. But now he was back. He was reclaiming a part of himself that had been hidden for too long. The notes grew bolder, more confident, yet still soft enough to be intimate. There was no rush, no showiness, only presence, intention, and feeling. The commuters continued to slow. The crowd began to form naturally around him, and more people were drawn in by the simple honesty of the music. No one spoke. No one made sudden movements. All that mattered was the melody, flowing gently, steadily. Fully Dot, the mother watched her child's eyes widen with fascination. She smiled, sensing the impact of the music, even before she fully understood it. She realized that this man, unknown and unremarkable in appearance, was creating a space of calm, a place where the noise of the world could pause for a while. She felt grateful without reason, her heart touched by something invisible yet powerful. The homeless veteran on the bench wiped a tear quietly. The melody reminded him of family, of lost opportunities, of youth and innocence. He had carried burdens for many years, but for these few minutes, the music offered him a moment of reprieve. He did not know the man's name, his story, or his life, but the music reminded him that there was still beauty in the world. Even when circumstances were difficult, the office worker stood still, breathing in the gentle harmony. Her shoulders relaxed, and for the first time that morning, her mind felt clear. She realized that she had been running through life mechanically, without noticing the moments around her. Now, for these few minutes, she felt alive, connected, human. She understood that something simple, something quiet, could touch a heart in ways nothing else could. The man played on, oblivious to recognition or applause. His hands moved naturally, gracefully, each note precise, but full of warmth. The crowd around him continued to grow, not by force, not by invitation, but by the invisible pull of music that touched something deep inside everyone. People of different ages, backgrounds, and worries were united for a short time by a single melody, by a single human soul choosing to share a piece of himself in a busy, crowded station. And in this moment, he was exactly where he needed to be, doing exactly what he needed to do. The world continued around him, noisy, busy, indifferent, but here, in this small corner, the man's fingers moved more confidently across the keys now, the melody beginning to take shape. It was no longer a hesitant start, no longer a cautious test of the public's attention. Each note carried weight, carrying feeling into the air like a gentle breeze that could not be ignored. The station, usually filled with chaos, noise, and hurried steps, now felt different. It was as if the music had opened an invisible space, where time slowed, where hearts could breathe, and where every person could feel a part of something larger than themselves. People began to pause more deliberately. A businessman rushing toward a platform slowed, glancing over his shoulder at the piano. His briefcase weighed heavily in his hand. his mind crowded with meetings, deadlines, and appointments. Yet the melody caught him, made him stop, made him realize that for a few moments there were no meetings, no deadlines, no demands on his attention. Only the music existed. He leaned against a pillar, listening with a quiet awe he hadn't felt in years. A young mother, still holding her child, felt her heart stir. She looked down at her little one, whose eyes were wide and sparkling, ears attuned to every note. The child was silent, mesmerized, as if understanding more than the sounds themselves. The mother realized she too was drawn into the music, and a tear formed in her eye. She was not sad, not exactly, but something deep inside her had been touched. Something gentle, fragile, and human. The homeless veteran on the bench shifted slightly, moving closer to the piano. The notes brought memories he had long buried. He remembered his childhood, small moments of joy, the laughter of friends, the feeling of hope that had once seemed unending. Those moments had been clouded by hardship, by years of struggle, by the sense that life had passed him by. Yet here, in the middle of the station, the music reminded him that beauty still existed, that life still held fragments of joy if one took the time to notice. The teenagers who had laughed earlier now stood quietly, their earlier joking replaced by fascination. They whispered softly to each other, unable to contain their amazement. "I didn't think it could sound like this," one said. I don't know, emotional." "I know," the other replied, equally quiet. "It's like he's telling a story with the piano." The man did not look at them. He did not need to. His focus was complete, his mind entirely immersed in the music. Each note, each chord, was deliberate yet flowing. It was a language without words, a conversation with the world that anyone could join simply by listening. The station had become an audience not of expectation, but of shared experience. Every person who had stopped now felt a sense of connection, as if they were participants in something they could not see, but could feel. A young office worker, standing near a pillar, let her arms relax. She had been tense, thinking of emails, calls, and meetings that demanded her attention. Now she felt the pressure ease. The music pulled her out of the rush, out of the endless cycle of worry and planning, and reminded her of the simple joys of life, moments of stillness, of reflection, of beauty. She looked around at the other commuters, noticing the subtle changes in their faces. Some had smiles, some had tears, some simply stood quietly, absorbed in the moment. The janitor, who had stopped sweeping earlier, now leaned fully against the wall, letting the melody reach him. He remembered playing music as a boy, learning small pieces on a piano that had long since been sold. Life had taken him away from music, from dreams, from moments of beauty, and yet, hearing this stranger play reminded him that those things were not lost. They could be rediscovered if one allowed themselves to notice. The children near the piano took a step closer, mesmerized. They whispered to each other softly, careful not to break the spell. They did not understand the technicality, the skill, or the story behind the music, but they felt its power, its emotion, its beauty. Their curiosity grew, not as a joke or a challenge, but as a genuine fascination with something alive, something human, something that seemed to speak directly to the heart. The melody grew richer, fuller, more expressive. It carried sadness, but also hope. It carried longing, but also joy. There was a rhythm to it, a natural flow that mirrored life itself. The man's hands moved effortlessly across the keys, each motion precise but gentle. He was not performing. He was existing, expressing, allowing the piano to speak through him. Nearby commuters began noticing each other. Strangers exchanged subtle glances, quiet smiles. For a moment, there was a shared understanding, a silent acknowledgement that something rare and beautiful was unfolding. The music was a bridge, connecting people who had never met, who might never meet again, yet for a few minutes were united in emotion, in presence, in shared human experience. The mother clutched her child close. She noticed a man in a suit nearby, his face tense, his jaw tight, yet even he had stopped pacing. Even he was listening, letting the music touch him. She realized that the piano, the man playing it, and the melody itself had created a pause, a space where all people, regardless of age, background, or worry, could breathe and feel together. The homeless veteran quietly wept, tears streaming down his cheeks. He had not cried in years, not like this, not in response to something so pure and unexpected. The music reminded him of family he had lost, of dreams abandoned, of life's fleeting moments. Yet it also reminded him that life could surprise, that joy could return, that even small moments of beauty could exist amidst hardship. The teenagers now stood in complete silence. They had forgotten their jokes, their hurried plans, their social media distractions. They were present, fully immersed in the moment. One whispered softly, "It's like he's playing our hearts." "Yes," the other replied. I can't explain it, but it feels like he knows something we don't, something important." The man's eyes remained closed. He was lost in his own world, yet fully aware of the world around him. The notes he played were both a reflection of his inner self and a gift to those who listened. He did not need applause, recognition, or gratitude. The music itself was enough. And yet, it was clear that those who heard it were affected subtly, changed, even if only for a few minutes. A woman carrying groceries leaned against a pillar, her arms tired, her mind busy. She closed her eyes briefly, letting the melody wash over her. For the first time in days, perhaps weeks, she felt a sense of calm. The music reminded her that life was not only about tasks, deadlines, and responsibilities. There was beauty, there was feeling, there was connection, and sometimes it arrived in the form of a stranger playing a piano in a busy train station. The children remained close, their eyes wide and sparkling. They were captivated, not by skill alone, but by the emotion, the honesty, the human quality of the music. They felt it, even without understanding. They were learning, without knowing, that music could carry feelings words could not, that it could tell stories, heal hearts, and connect people. The man's hands moved gracefully, each note deliberate, each chord measured but full of warmth. The melody was no longer hesitant. It flowed freely, naturally, with a quiet strength. The crowd around him had grown, not by force, but by the invisible pull of beauty, authenticity, and human connection. People were drawn softly, quietly, without realizing how or why. The office worker, still leaning against the pillar, noticed the subtle changes in those around her. A young man in a uniform had paused mid-step, his eyes soft. An elderly woman, her arms full of packages, had stopped to listen, a faint smile on her face. Even those who could not stop completely had slowed, their attention caught, their hearts touched. The music had created a moment where everyone, regardless of their life or their worries, felt something human, something shared, something real. The janitor, still leaning against the wall, closed his eyes. He remembered being a boy, playing small songs on a piano in a classroom that had long since been torn down. Life had taken him away from music, but this moment reminded him that it had never truly left. Music, like joy, like hope, like love, could always return, often when least expected, often when one needed it most. The mother, still holding her child, whispered softly, "It's beautiful." The child looked up at her, eyes wide, and simply nodded. They did not need words. They felt it. They understood it in a way only children could, pure and honest, without judgment, without distraction. The man's expression remained calm. He was not aware of the crowd's fascination. He was unaware of the subtle changes in their emotions, their postures, their attention. He played because he had returned to something he had once loved, something he had set aside, something that had waited patiently for his presence. And in returning, he unknowingly created a moment that would remain in the hearts of many, remembered quietly, without need for recognition or fame. The melody continued, now more expressive, more layered. There was a sadness, a gentle melancholy that spoke of memories lost and time past, yet there was also hope, a quiet promise that life could still surprise, that beauty could be found in unexpected places, that connection did exist even among strangers. The commuters now formed a loose circle, standing at a respectful distance, allowing themselves to be carried by the music. Some had tears, some had smiles, some simply listened, absorbing the sound as if it were part of the air itself. The station, once just a place of motion and noise, had become a sanctuary, a shared human experience brought to life by... The man leaned closer to the piano, feeling the coolness of the keys under his fingertips. He had played enough to feel the flow of the station, the subtle rhythms of people moving, breathing, existing around him. Yet now he wanted more than to just play. He wanted to reach deeper, to let the music carry emotion in a way words could never manage. He closed his eyes again, feeling the weight of his own memories, the quiet longing that had been tucked away. For years, each note he pressed was deliberate, yet full of life. The station had become quieter, not because people were shushing each other, but because the music demanded attention. It had a gravity, a pull, a gentle insistence that made people slow, pause, notice. The mother, still holding her child, felt her heart tug in ways she couldn't explain. The child's small hand reached for hers instinctively, as if seeking comfort from the emotion in the air. She pressed her lips together, swallowing a lump in her throat, feeling a stirring of something tender she had not experienced in a long time. The homeless man on the bench had leaned forward, elbows on his knees. The melody reminded him of times when life felt simpler, of moments when hope existed without the shadow of struggle. Tears ran quietly down his face. He did not try to wipe them away, nor did he care if anyone saw. The music had reached something deep within him, something that had been buried by years of hardship and loneliness. For the first time in months, he felt fully alive, fully human, fully part of something. Nearby, the teenagers had stopped whispering. Their initial curiosity had transformed into a shared awe. One of them, who had always been too cool to show emotion, felt his chest tighten. He glanced at his friend and saw the same recognition there, that this was no ordinary performance, no simple piano piece played for attention. This was honesty, raw and human, delivered through music that spoke directly to the heart. The office worker leaned against the pillar, her briefcase forgotten on the ground. She closed her eyes, letting the melody wash over her. The rush of deadlines, emails, and meetings seemed to drift away. For the first time in weeks, maybe months, she felt a sense of peace. She realized that she had been moving through life mechanically, missing moments like this, moments where something real could touch her soul. She opened her eyes briefly and glanced at the faces around her. Strangers had stopped too, absorbed, quiet, as if drawn into the same invisible web. The man's hands moved across the keys with increasing confidence. The melody grew more layered, more complex, yet never overwhelming. There was sadness, yes, but also warmth. There was longing, yet also hope. The music carried his personal story memories of a mother long gone, moments of joy from a youth he had cherished, regrets he could never undo. But it was also a story shared, a story that touched the hearts of those who listened, whether they knew it or not. The janitor had lowered his broom completely and leaned against the wall, letting himself be carried by the music. He remembered. Learning small piano pieces as a boy, the feeling of accomplishment when a melody came together. Life had pulled him away from music, from dreams, from simple pleasures. Yet now, in the middle of a crowded station, he felt that beauty could still be found. That even in the rush of life, there were moments to pause, to feel, to connect. The children had stopped whispering. They were mesmerized, tiny faces lit with wonder. They did not understand why the music felt so strong, why it made them feel warm inside and a little sad at the same time. But they felt it. They understood it in their own way. Music had taught them something important without words, that life could be beautiful, that strangers could share feelings, that even a quiet moment could hold magic. The man's eyes were closed, but his mind was aware of everything. He could feel the pause in the station, the gentle attention, the subtle energy shift. It was not applause, nor was it recognition. It was something quieter, something deeper, a shared human experience, a brief connection among strangers, all of them touching a common thread through music. He pressed a chord, soft but lingering. The melody shifted slightly, expressing a longing he had never voiced aloud. Memories of his mother came to him, teaching him music in a small room filled with sunlight, her hands guiding his fingers over the keys. He remembered the warmth of her voice, the gentle encouragement, the pride in her eyes. Life had taken him far from that room, from her care, from the simplicity of pure music. And yet here he was, years later, sharing that memory silently with the world through the notes he played. The mother with her child pressed her cheek to her child's head. The child's eyes sparkled, reflecting curiosity and wonder. She could feel her own heartbeat slow, aligning with the rhythm of the music. It was a calm she had not experienced in months, perhaps years. She realized the man was not playing for anyone but himself, yet everyone listening was a part of it. That's what made it powerful. She thought the honesty, the truth, the humanity. The homeless man leaned back slightly, tears streaming. He did not try to hide them. He had learned long ago that the world rarely paused for him, that people often overlooked him. Yet now, in this crowded station, someone had reached him through something as simple and pure as music. His soul felt lighter, his heart fuller, and for a fleeting moment, he remembered what it meant to hope. The teenagers looked at one another, exchanging glances of shared understanding. They whispered softly, but their words carried awe, not noise. "It's amazing," one said. "I can't even describe it. It's like he knows all of us." "Yeah," the other replied. "It feels like he's playing for everyone here, for us all at the same time." The office worker had a small smile on her lips. She thought about how much she had rushed through life, focused on tasks and obligations, never taking the time to stop, to notice, to feel. Yet here, she realized, the music had done that for her. It had carved a small space in her busy life where she could just exist, fully, without demands, without schedules, without interruptions. The janitor wiped his eyes quietly. He did not know the man's story, and he did not need to. The music itself spoke louder than words ever could. He remembered his childhood, his dreams, his hopes. Life had been harsh, but in this moment he felt a flicker of joy, a spark of beauty that had not been extinguished. The man's melody grew richer, the notes flowing like water over rocks, steady yet unpredictable, gentle yet profound. There was a sadness to some notes, but they were not heavy. They were reflective, honest, human. There was hope in the rising tones, encouragement in the gentle lulls. Everyone who listened felt it, whether they were aware of it or not. Their hearts responded in tiny, quiet ways, small movements of understanding and recognition that life could be beautiful, that kindness and connection existed even among strangers. The children had moved slightly closer, fascinated. They watched the man's hands, small fingers bouncing over keys, creating a story they could feel, but not yet fully understand. They whispered softly to one another, trying to describe the emotions they felt. It was not about skill, nor fame, nor recognition. It was about something deeper, something essential, about being human, being alive, and being connected. The mother with her child took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her own worries lift slightly. She thought about the world outside the station, the chaos waiting for her, the responsibilities piling up. But for now, she could breathe. She could feel. She could exist in this small bubble of shared experience, held together by notes that seemed to speak directly to the soul. The homeless man finally smiled faintly, the first in many months. He had been hardened by years of struggle, yet the music reminded him that softness, vulnerability, and beauty were not lost. He felt part of something, even in a place where he often felt invisible. For these few minutes, he was seen, not in the conventional sense, but through shared emotion, through humanity, through connection. The teenagers remained still, captivated. Their initial amusement had disappeared, replaced by awe and reflection. One whispered again, "It's like he's playing our feelings, not just music." "Yes," the other replied. "It's like he knows what we've all been through." The office worker closed her eyes again. She could feel the subtle energy around her, the way strangers were connected by the same invisible thread of emotion. For a moment, the station ceased to be just a place of transit. It became a living, breathing space of human connection, of shared feeling of quiet awe. The man's hands moved gracefully, effortlessly. The notes flowed, creating waves of emotion that touched everyone present. Sadness, hope, longing, warmth, and joy intertwined in a delicate balance. It was not technical brilliance that held attention, but honesty. It was not a performance that demanded applause, but a gift that reached hearts without expectation. The melody lingered, drawing everyone closer together. Strangers glanced at one another, smiles forming, eyes softening. There was no need for words. They understood, collectively, that something extraordinary was happening, something human, something real. And all of it came from a man and a piano. A simple interaction that had opened hearts and minds in ways few people could ever expect. For the man, this was more than a performance. It was a return, a reconnection with a part of himself that had been silent for too long. Music had always been his refuge, his companion, his voice when words failed. Life had taken him away from it, demanded other PR. The man's hands moved over the keys with a confidence that seemed effortless, yet each note carried depth, care, and emotion. He did not play for the crowd, though they were there, gathered quietly, absorbed in the sound. He played for himself, for the memories and feelings that had been tucked away for years, waiting for this moment. And in doing so, he shared a piece of his soul with every person present, each note reaching out like a gentle hand, offering comfort, connection, and understanding. The station had grown still. Even the clatter of rolling suitcases had slowed. Commuters who had been rushing paused, watching or listening, forgetting their deadlines, their appointments, and even the platforms where their trains waited. There was a sense in the air, something unspoken yet tangible, a quiet understanding that this moment was special. People did not speak, did not move unnecessarily. They let themselves be carried by the music, drawn into the rhythm and emotion of the melody. The mother with her child felt tears forming again. She pressed her lips together to hold them back, but the emotion was too strong. The melody reminded her of nights spent reading to her child, of hopes and dreams she carried for the little one in her arms. The music connected her past and present, her memories and her hopes. She squeezed her child close, letting the tiny fingers grip hers, feeling their shared heartbeat in time with the piano's rhythm. The homeless veteran on the bench had closed his eyes, tears running freely down his face. The music had brought memories he thought he had long buried, laughter with friends, love lost, family he had not seen in decades. Life had been harsh, but here, in this crowded station, he felt that warmth again, that quiet reminder of joy, of hope, of humanity. The music reached beyond his eyes, beyond his ears. It touched his very soul. The teenagers, who had stopped by out of curiosity, now stood completely still. Their earlier whispers and laughter were gone, replaced by a quiet awe. One of them, someone who usually carried a mask of indifference, felt his chest tighten. It was not sadness exactly, nor happiness alone. It was a mixture of emotions, raw and pure, a reflection of all the unspoken feelings he had never allowed himself to acknowledge. "It's incredible," he whispered to his friend. "I know," the other replied softly. It feels like it's reaching inside me." The office worker had her arms crossed loosely, her briefcase abandoned at her feet. She could feel the tension in her body melting away. Her mind, so often cluttered with work and responsibilities, was suddenly clear, present, attuned only to the music. She glanced at the people around her, realizing that strangers were connected by something invisible, a shared humanity that was rare and precious. For a few minutes, they were no longer strangers. They were part of the same story, touched by the same melody. The janitor leaned against the wall, eyes closed, letting the music take him back to a childhood long gone. He remembered his first piano lessons, the pride of mastering a simple piece, the excitement of discovering music for the first time. Life had pulled him away from all of that, leaving only fragments, but the man at the piano reminded him that beauty could return, that hope could resurface, that life could still surprise. Even the children had stopped their playful chatter. They were mesmerized, small faces full of wonder. They whispered softly to one another, too quiet to disturb the spell, too young to articulate what they were feeling. They only knew that it was magical, that the notes on the piano seemed alive, breathing, telling a story bigger than the station, bigger than themselves, yet somehow belonging to all of them. The man's fingers pressed the keys with precision and tenderness. Each note was a message, each chord a small revelation. The melody rose and fell, swelling with emotion, yet never overwhelming. There was sorrow in some notes, joy in others, a gentle hope in the spaces between. People listened, rapt, feeling each emotion as if it belonged to them. They were not passive observers, they were participants, connected invisibly to the music and to one another. The mother with her child wiped a tear from her cheek, though her child was too young to understand fully. She whispered softly, "Isn't it beautiful?" The child nodded, eyes wide, in the movement of the man's hands, in the sounds that filled the space around them. For a moment, all worries melted away, replaced by pure, unspoken feeling. The homeless veteran opened, his eyes briefly, looking around at the crowd. He noticed faces softened by emotion, strangers sharing silent glances, nods, and subtle smiles. None of them spoke aloud, yet there was an understanding among them, a recognition that this moment, though fleeting, was sacred. The music had created a space where everyone could be human, fully, without pretension or pretense. The teenagers whispered again, awe still evident in their voices. "It's like he's telling our stories," one said softly. "Yes," the other replied. "Even though he doesn't know us, he's playing for us all." The office worker's eyes welled up with tears. She had never experienced something like this in her life, a simple moment of music creating a profound sense of connection with people she had never met. She realized that life's most beautiful moments often arrived unexpectedly, unplanned, and without ceremony. Here, in this station, The music had created exactly the dot the man's melody deepened. It was not about technique or virtuosity, no. It was about feeling, about expression, about reaching into the hearts of those around him and touching something fundamental. He did not play for recognition, for applause, or for fame. He played because it was his voice, the part of him that had waited years to speak. And as he played, every person listening became part of that voice, part of the story he was telling. The station had transformed. What was once a place of hurried chaos and noise was now a sanctuary of stillness and emotion. Every person present felt it differently, yet each felt it profoundly. The mother, the veteran, the teenagers, the office worker, the janitor, the children, all of them were connected by something invisible, yet undeniable. They shared an experience that would remain in their hearts long after they had left, a moment of quiet humanity in a world often too loud and too fast. The mother's child tugged gently at her sleeve, pointing at the piano. She smiled, squeezing his hand. "Yes, it's wonderful," she said softly. The child's eyes reflected awe and curiosity. He did not fully understand why he felt such emotion, but he knew it was real, and that was enough. The homeless veteran inhaled deeply, letting the music fill his lungs and his chest. He felt alive in a way he had forgotten. Tears continued to stream down his face, unashamed, unrestrained. The music had opened something inside him, a door he thought had been closed for good. And for the first time in many years, he felt hope, joy, and a fragile sense of belonging. The teenagers were still transfixed. One whispered softly, "I've never felt anything like this." "Me neither," the other replied. It's like it's speaking to all the things I can't say." The office worker finally let herself cry quietly, tears rolling down her cheeks. She felt an unfamiliar peace, a calm she hadn't known in years. The music had stripped away layers of stress, anxiety, and distraction. It reminded her of what truly mattered: connection, emotion, and the beauty of simple, human experiences. The janitor wiped his eyes and leaned further against the wall. He had lived a hard life, one that had taught him to expect little and give up hope often. Yet the music had reminded him that joy could return, that beauty could exist even in ordinary places, that the human spirit could still be touched by something as simple as a melody played with honesty and love. The children moved a little closer, whispering to each other softly. They watched the man's hands, fascinated, captivated by the story the music was telling. They did not understand it fully, but they felt it. They felt the emotion, the connection, the beauty, and that was enough. The man's hands moved across the keys in a gentle but deliberate rhythm. The melody swelled, carrying a combination of sadness, joy, hope, and love. It was a story of life itself, a story that each listener could interpret in their own way, a story that reached past words and directly into the heart. The mother, with her child, pressed the child close, feeling the music wrap around them like a warm blanket. She thought about life's small miracles, the unexpected gifts that arrive at ordinary moments, and the simple truth that sometimes connection could be found where she least expected it. The homeless veteran lifted his head and looked around. Strangers were crying quietly, smiling gently, or simply standing still, captivated. He realized that this was more than music. It was a reminder of humanity, of empathy, of shared experience. For a few minutes, people who would otherwise never know each other were connected in a profound and invisible way. The teenagers whispered once more, awed and silent. It's perfect," one said softly. "Yes," the other replied. I think it's the best thing I've ever heard." The office worker's tears continued, but her smile had returned. She felt something shift inside her, a subtle but permanent change. The music had reminded her that even in a busy, overwhelming world, there were moments of beauty, moments of connection, moments that could remind her what it meant to be human. The man's melody softened, lingering in the air, delicate but full of meaning. It was not the end, but it was a moment of pause, a space for everyone present to breathe, to reflect, to feel the weight and warmth of human. The station had become a quiet sanctuary. Even the usual announcements over the loudspeaker seemed distant, softened by the music that flowed from the piano. The man's hands moved with confidence and tenderness, each note carrying years of unspoken emotion. The melody was no longer just a song. It had become a living thing, wrapping around everyone present, speaking in a language that required no words. The mother holding her child leaned against a nearby pillar, pressing her cheek to the child's head. Tears ran down her face, unbidden, as she felt something she had almost forgotten: pure, unguarded emotion. She thought of the struggles she faced, the exhaustion of balancing work, life, and responsibility, and yet the music had softened every weight she carried. She noticed the small smiles of strangers around her, people she had never met, all drawn together by something invisible, intangible, but profoundly real. The homeless veteran sat on his bench, eyes closed, his face wet with tears. He had lived a long, hard life, hardened by experience, disappointment, and loss. Yet this music had reminded him of the softer moments of existence, the beauty he had long thought gone. Memories flooded back, a mother's warmth, laughter shared with friends, the joy of youth. All of it seemed present again, not as a memory, but as a feeling that could be touched, felt, and held. The teenagers had stopped whispering. Their initial curiosity had evolved into reverent attention. One of them, normally guarded and indifferent, felt a tightening in his chest. The melody seemed to reach into him, acknowledging every fear, every hope, every unspoken thought he carried. He looked at his friend, who was equally silent, and they exchanged a glance that said more than words ever could. They were witnessing something extraordinary, a moment they would carry with them for the rest of their lives. The office worker closed her eyes, leaning against the pillar. She felt the tension in her shoulders ease, the tightness in her chest release. It was as if the music had reached inside her and gently rearranged the pieces, leaving her lighter, calmer, and more aware of the world around her. She thought about all the moments she had rushed through, the days spent chasing tasks without pause, and she realized that this simple, unexpected moment was more valuable than any achievement, any success she had ever known. The janitor, leaning against the wall, with his broom forgotten, wiped his eyes quietly. Memories of his own childhood came rushing back, sitting at a small piano in a sunlit room, feeling the thrill of discovering music, the pride in playing a piece correctly. Life had taken him away from all of that, leaving him hardened and weary. Yet here, in the middle of the bustling station, he felt alive again, reminded that beauty and joy could always return. Even when least expected, the children moved closer, still whispering softly to one another. They were captivated not by technical skill, but by the honesty in the music, the way it seemed to tell a story that touched everyone differently, yet equally. They did not fully understand it, but they felt it deeply. They were learning without, realizing that life could be extraordinary in small, quiet moments, that beauty could exist even in the ordinary, and that shared experience could create invisible bonds stronger than words. The man's fingers continued their dance across the keys, moving with precision yet fluidity, carrying the full spectrum of human emotion. Each note resonated, each chord lingered, reaching every corner of the station. The melody swelled with quiet strength, flowing seamlessly between joy and sadness, hope and longing. It was not a performance. It was an offering, a gift of himself and his memories to the world. He pressed a soft chord, letting it echo, linger, and dissolve. The crowd seemed to breathe in unison, sharing a collective stillness, a suspended moment in time. There was no rush, no distraction, only the music and the emotions it evoked. The station, once chaotic and busy, had become a shared space of human connection, where strangers found themselves united by the same intangible thread. The mother felt her heart swell as the music seemed to embrace her. She thought of all the times she had felt unseen, unheard, and overburdened. Yet here, she was part of something larger, a collective experience of empathy, emotion, and beauty. She pressed her child close and whispered softly, "It's okay. We're okay," though the words were unnecessary. The music said it all. The homeless veteran inhaled deeply, letting the melody fill him completely. For a few precious minutes, he was no longer alone. He was part of something, part of a story, being told not with words, but with the most human of expressions, music. He felt his spirit lift, his mind quiet, and a warmth spread through him that had been absent for far too long. The teenagers were silent, faces softened, eyes glistening. They felt the subtle power of the moment, the quiet authority of someone, fully expressing themselves. They understood now that this was more than music. It was a lesson in vulnerability, in courage, in humanity. One of them whispered softly, almost to himself, "I've never felt anything like this." "Me neither," the other replied. It's real. It's alive." The office worker's tears flowed freely now, but she smiled through them. She felt a sense of connection she had never experienced in such a public space. It was as if, through music, all the barriers between people, social, economic, personal, had vanished. For a moment, they were all simply human, sharing the same feeling, the same story, the same quiet awe. The janitor closed his eyes completely, letting the music transport him. He remembered the dreams of his youth, the moments of joy he had abandoned, the hope he had thought lost. And here it was, returned through the notes of someone who had once loved music as much as he had. The connection was unspoken, profound, undeniable. The children leaned in closer still, captivated by the man's movements, by the sound, by the emotion that seemed to fill the station itself. They whispered softly, pointing at the keys, marveling at how such simple objects could create something so powerful. They did not fully understand, but they felt it, and that was enough. The man's melody shifted now, growing more powerful, more expressive, more alive. He allowed himself to play from memory, from feeling, from the depths of his heart. Each note was deliberate, yet free, resonant with the entirety of his experience. The sorrow of the past, the joy of discovery, the hope for connection, all were woven into the music. The mother pressed her child closer, feeling the warmth and depth of the melody. She noticed the faces around her, strangers moved to tears, to smiles, to silent reflection. She realized that, in this brief moment, the world had paused. People were connected in a way they rarely were, united by something invisible yet powerful, a shared recognition of beauty and humanity. The homeless veteran opened his eyes, glancing around at the crowd. Each face held a story, a reaction to the music that was personal yet universal. He felt a profound sense of belonging, a reminder that even in a life that had often been lonely, he was never truly alone. The music had woven them all together for a fleeting, precious time. The teenagers whispered once more, awe still etched on their faces. "It's like he's touching everything we feel," one said. "Yes," the other replied softly, "even the stuff we don't say." The office worker realized she had never felt such clarity in years. Life, in all its chaos, suddenly seemed manageable, full of possibility and beauty. The music had opened a space in her heart she had not known existed. Tears streamed down her cheeks, not from sadness alone, but from the recognition of something larger, something profoundly human. The janitor's hands gripped the broom loosely. He had witnessed much in his life, yet this felt extraordinary. The music reminded him that even ordinary moments could carry extraordinary meaning, that beauty and connection could appear in the most unexpected places. The children whispered among themselves, amazed at the emotion, the honesty, the story the man was telling. They did not need words to understand. They felt it in their hearts. The music was teaching them, in its quiet, unassuming way, about life, humanity, and the importance of feeling deeply. The man's hands glided over the keys, moving with grace, intent, and power. He played with purpose now, letting every emotion surface. The crowd listened, fully present, each person carrying their own story, yet sharing in this collective experience. The melody rose, soared, and gently fell, carrying sorrow and hope, fear and love, loss and joy, all intertwined seamlessly. The mother with her child sobbed quietly, tears wetting the child's small hands as she held them. The homeless veterans' shoulders shook with silent tears. The teenagers were stunned, whispering only occasionally. The office worker leaned against the pillar, weeping openly, yet smiling. Even the janitor had tears running down his face softened with quiet reflection. The children watched, fascinated and solemn, feeling the depth of what was unfolding before them. The man continued, oblivious to the recognition, yet fully aware of the human effect he was having. He played from his memories, his heart, and his soul, not seeking acknowledgement, only expression. And as he did, every person listening was irrevocably changed, touched in ways words could never capture, feeling the beauty, sorrow, and hope that he poured through the piano. Finally, he pressed the last chord. It lingered, suspended in the knee, air vibrating softly, carrying the emotions of the moment to every corner of the station. And then, slowly, life returned, the hum of conversation, the movement of commuters.